Hello and welcome back to our last session today for Training Industry Leader Talk, L&D's role in driving organizational change, sponsored by Sweet Rush, Leadership Progress Cycle by Niche Academy, ELB Learning, HSI, Atana, and Open Sesame. So I'm Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speakers and get the most out of today's program. So throughout today's event, please feel free to use that chat for comments and submitting all your questions. All of our questions will be addressed throughout the event. We have a lovely person from Atana who's going to be helping us named Hannah, so be sure to reach out with those. And at your end of your time here with us, you will see a short evaluation survey popped open in another tab in your browser. We would appreciate your thoughts on today's event. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand session. If this is your first training industry event, we would love to welcome you. Training industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research report, membership, and our podcast. And we would love to hear about what you've learned from today's sessions on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue the conversation. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker. He is passionate about helping organizations create workplaces where employees are engaged, respectful, and committed to company success. John Hansen is the chairman and CEO of Atana, and a company that has redefined workplace culture and training. In this role, John leads Atana's growth and innovation initiatives while providing strategic insights and guidance to its customers, analysts, and investors. And with that, take it away, John.
Thank you, Liz. And good day, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and it's great to be with you today. I'm excited to be speaking with such a dedicated group of learning and development professionals from around the world. I found value, I hope you did too, from the previous speakers. There were some really good ideas discussed, and your chats and comments were great. Hannah Tilley is joining me today to assist in interacting with your many chats. Thanks, Hannah. And let me start my screen here and share it with you. There we go. And hopefully everyone has that. Is that yep, that should work. So let's get started. I really appreciated Scott Provence's session and diving deep into the behavioral science models. Claire's playbook comments about culture and workplace behaviors was spot on. Those lead into my discussion today on the application of behavioral science for organizational change. Something fun about me, outside of my day job, I'm a certified flight instructor. When pilots begin a journey, they always start with a flight plan, a clear roadmap of where they're going and how they'll get there. Today, I'd like to be your co-pilot as we navigate the skies of organizational learning, charting a new course from where L&D typically functions today to where it has the potential to go. Before we take off, I'd like to start with a question. I ask this question frequently. Think back to the last time you completed mandatory compliance training. Maybe it was a sexual harassment prevention course, an ethics course, cybersecurity awareness. And when you finished taking that training, did you think, wow, that was life-changing? I'm a completely different person. Yeah, I didn't think so. And that's exactly the reason I expected. It tells us everything we need to know about the state of traditional learning today. We've all been there, clicking through endless slides, watching outdated videos, taking quizzes designed to satisfy regulators rather than transform behaviors. And in the end, what have we accomplished? We've checked a box. We fulfilled a requirement. But have we really created any meaningful behavior change? This disconnect between what learning could be and what it often is has been bothering me for decades. I'm someone who has led 8 technology companies throughout my career. I've experienced every type of corporate training imaginable. Most of it was forgettable at best, painful at worst. What a missed opportunity of staggering proportions. Just think about the time and money wasted and the frustration of reporting less than stellar outcomes to your leadership team. But what if I told you that as L&D professionals, you are sitting on an untapped gold mine? What if I told you that you have the power to drive real organizational change, not just fulfill training requests? What if those mandatory training hours that employees dread could actually become the most powerful catalyst for transformation in your organization? Today, I want to explore how behavioral science can transform L&D from a cost center into a strategic driver of workforce transformation. I want to do this because I wholeheartedly believe that this is your moment to step into your power and make a profound difference in your organization. Let's start by being honest about where L&D often stands today in organizational hierarchies. In my conversations with hundreds of learning professionals over the years, I hear the same story. L&D is stuck in a cycle of compliance. A request comes in, training is delivered, completion rates are recorded, and then it's on to the next topic. But checking boxes isn't the same as changing behaviors. And that's where the real impact of L&D is lost, as you know. The reality is that in many organizations, L&D is treated as a stepchild department. You're given a budget, told to deliver mandatory and company-required training, and then blamed when people don't want to take that training. I remember attending my first ATD conference years ago after acquiring Atana. I was still new to the L&D industry, having spent my career in technology. Walking around that conference, I heard the same conversations over and over again. How can we get a seat at the table? How can we prove our value to the C-suite? How can we be seen as strategic partners rather than just training providers? These questions have persisted for decades, yet in many organizations, little has changed. When budgets get tight, L&D is often first on the chopping block. Why? Because in too many organizations, there's a fundamental gap between what the business needs and what L&D delivers. The C-suite is focused on business strategy and financial performance, and L&D is focused on learning outcomes. These goals can appear misaligned, creating a gap that is difficult to bridge. I experienced this disconnect firsthand. After one of my companies was acquired by a large corporation, all the employees had to sit through 2 full days of orientation training. Yes, 2 full days. The training was outdated, irrelevant, and completely detached from the reality of why they had acquired us in the first place. For our people, our technology, our expertise. During the break, I turned to my VP of HR and said, I don't get it. They just spent hundreds of millions of dollars buying our company for our brain trust. And yet they're putting us through this horrible training. What impression will all these employees have after these 2 days? I won't even get into the non-answer I received. All it really told me was the disconnect was astounding and unfortunately too common. And I mentioned this was a large corporation. But here's the exciting part. L&D is uniquely positioned to drive organizational change in a way that no other function can. Why? You have a captive audience. You have regular touch points with employees across the organization. You have visibility into multiple departments and levels, And you can be the eyes and ears of the organization, identifying issues before they become crises. Let's talk about the resources you already have at your disposal. In California, as you know, managers are required to take 2 hours of sexual harassment prevention training every 2 years. In Chicago, oh my gosh, I feel for you if you're in Chicago. It's 2 hours for every employee and 3 hours for every manager annually. That's a significant amount of time and attention from your workforce. I hope, by the way, someone can explain to me the behavioral science behind time-based compliance training. If you don't get it in 1 hour, we'll force you to take it in 2. These moments should count. They are high-value opportunities to drive real behavioral change and gather insights that can transform your organization. So let's talk about how we can transform these mandatory trainings into real learning opportunities. And to do that, let's review the 3 domains of learning. Now, most of you already know. 1, cognitive learning, what we know, the facts, concepts, and theories. 2, affective learning, how we feel, our emotions, attitudes, and values. And 3, behavioral learning, what we do, our actions and behaviors in real situations. Traditionally, L&D has focused almost exclusively on cognitive learning, but we know knowledge rarely changes behavior. And behavioral change is what drives organizational transformation. Let me share a personal story. As a certified flight instructor, I've seen how all 3 domains are essential. In the cognitive domain, I had a student who could recite every regulation and procedure flawlessly. He knew the 4 forces of flight: lift, weight, thrust, drag, and could explain exactly how an aircraft could be controlled in theory. Perfect test scores, but knowledge wasn't enough. In the affective domain, when this same student experienced his first stall, the aircraft is flying slower and slower, stall horn starts blaring in your ear, the stall is imminent, and then suddenly the nose drops. And if you're not perfectly coordinated in your controls, you could drop a wing and begin a spin. It's a little intense. But his knowledge vanished as fear took over. Despite knowing exactly what to do, his emotions overrode his training. I tell new instructors, if you're not constantly thinking about how your student might kill you, they'll kill you. Managing emotions is just as critical as knowledge. In the behavioral domain, another student intellectually understood that controlling an aircraft is different from driving a car. You turn by turning a steering wheel in a car. In a plane, you're going through a 3-dimensional space. But his ingrained driving behaviors persisted. Approaching a towered airport, Renton Airport up here in Seattle, where they make the Boeing 737, so lots of big airplanes coming and going. I was teaching this student how to land. And I kept saying, right rudder, but he kept drifting left, getting closer and closer to the tower. Until finally I said, my airplane, which means I'm taking control. As I corrected the approach, zoomed past the tower, fairly close. The tower controller came on the radio and said, good to see you too, 513 Whiskey Foxtrot. Remember my comment about how student pilots are trying to kill you? No amount of cognitive training could overcome his drive, overcome his ingrained behaviors. He needed experience, an intense experience in this case, to drive that behavioral change. And it wasn't one and done. This student needed persistent behavioral reinforcement. What makes a good pilot or a good employee isn't just knowledge. It's the seamless integration of knowing what to do, having the right emotional relationship with the task, and possessing the correct behaviors to execute correctly. The same principle applies to organizational learning. Most training focuses on sharing information, but lasting change requires engaging how people feel and giving them opportunities to practice new behaviors. When we design learning that transforms how people think, feel, and act, that's when we see real change. And you know this, but how can we make it happen? So the key is behavioral science. Behavioral science, the study of human behavior, explains why we do what we do and what influences our decisions and actions, and creates an understanding of how we can create lasting change. When I'm teaching someone how to land an airplane, one of the most challenging skills for new pilots, I could simply tell them the procedure. Maintain proper airspeed, establish the correct descent rate, flare at the right moment, and touch down smoothly. But that cognitive understanding does not create a good pilot. Instead, I have to help them develop the right feel for the aircraft, how the controls respond at different as the airspeed decreases, how to judge height above the runway, how to manage their emotions as the ground is rushing towards them. This requires understanding not just what behaviors make a good landing, but what psychological factors influence a pilot's actions in that critical phase of flight. Behavioral science gives us the same insight into workplace learning, understanding not just what behaviors we want to see, but what psychological factors influence those behaviors and how we can effectively change them. But training doesn't exist only in that perfect scenario. Effective training prepares you for the moments when nothing goes according to plan. One of the hardest things about learning to fly isn't memorizing procedures. It's what happens when something goes wrong in the air, as sadly we just saw that happened up in Canada. If you're driving a car and something goes wrong, you pull over, call AAA, and wait for help. In a plane, there's no pulling over. If you lose an engine, if you hit bad weather, if you get that wind gust when you're coming in for landing and your instruments fail, you have to troubleshoot in real time while still flying the airplane. That's why, as pilots, we don't just learn theory, we train for emergencies constantly. Think about sexual harassment training. Employees may know the laws, but do they recognize the subtle warning signs? Do they know what to do when something happens in real life? Imagine a new hire whose manager offers to drive them home, lingers too long, or makes a joking comment that just feels off. If they never thought through what harassment looks like, they might brush it off. They might rationalize it. Was it really that bad? Am I overreacting? This is why behavioral science matters. Just like pilots train for emergencies before they happen, companies need to train their people to recognize, respond to, and prevent issues before they escalate. A good pilot doesn't wait engine failure to start learning about engine failures. We practice before we ever get in the air. The same should be true in business. Preventative training isn't just about checking a compliance box. It's about making sure that when a real world situation happens, people know how to respond, not just in theory, but in practice. Now, let's talk about why compliance training so often misses the mark. For over 30 years, organizations have been doing sexual harassment prevention training. I apologize for using that topic because it's so prevalent still to this day. But yet the needle hasn't moved on reducing incidents, even since the Me Too movement. Why? Because most compliance training focuses on cognitive learning. Many of you are using compliance training where it's still based on cognitive learning. Explain the laws, policies, and procedures. It tells people what not to do, but fails to reinforce the behaviors that create real change. Employees may complete the training, but when faced with a real-world situation, they often default to ingrained habits, social norms, or uncertainty. Think of it like flying through turbulence. When the skies are clear, it's easy to feel in control. Following the flight path without a second thought, even having the autopilot do the flying. But when the aircraft starts shaking, the winds pick up and visibility drops, that's when your training is put to the real test. Pilots who have only memorized procedures without practicing in high-pressure scenarios are more likely to react poorly. Some even freeze altogether. The same happens in the workplace. Employees may know the policies, but when faced with a tense moment, they often hesitate. Without real behavioral reinforcement, the right response isn't instinctual. That's human nature. But what if we use mandatory training time to create deeper learning experiences that actually shift behavior? What if we could identify cultural turbulence before it led to workplace crises? What if we designed training that didn't just check a box, but actually changed how people act? And I'm not just talking about creating great content. We have great content. Others have great content. But you need to also apply ways in the behavioral science into the courses. This is where we get a better approach. By integrating effective and behavioral learning into compliance training, we can turn these mandated sessions into powerful tools for shaping workplace culture. And when done right, that's not just good training, it's also risk mitigation at its best. And of course, I'm using compliance, but that's not the only area where behavioral science can be effectively applied. We know the issues about turnover and engagement issues. According to Gallup, only about 33% of US employees are engaged at work. 16% are actively disengaging. This is costing the US economy an estimated $1.9 trillion annually. This is a crisis. And if I can use another flying analogy. In aviation, there's something called control flight into terrain, CFIT. When a fully functional aircraft crashes because the pilot loses situational awareness. Sadly, this is what caused the famous crash that killed the pilot John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn, and his sister and her sister Lauren. John F. Kennedy Jr. was a relatively new pilot. He was flying off the coast by Martha's Vineyard on a hazy late afternoon day just outside of sight of land. The ocean was glass smooth, so he couldn't really tell where the horizon was, nor did he notice that the plane started a gradual turn to the left. Due to vestibular illusion, you start actually turning to the left. And this turn gets steeper and steeper, and you can't tell sitting in that airplane until it was too late. The plane was flying, the instruments were working, but the pilot didn't recognize the warning signs until it was too late. In his case, he wasn't instrument trained in order to prevent that from happening. This is what's happening in too many organizations that I have seen. Leadership assumes things are fine because employees are showing up completing their work and passing performance reviews. But beneath the surface, disengagement is pulling the company down. And we know this doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow descent, often masked by routine. Employees stop offering ideas. They withdraw from conversations. They do what's required, but nothing more. By the time leadership recognizes the problem, the organization has already lost altitude. Top performers have left, innovation has stalled, and workplace culture has eroded. In L&D, you should be able to be the early warning signaler. What causes this disengagement? We know the three fundamental reasons. Safety. They're not feeling psychologically safe, able to speak up, share ideas, even when they make mistakes without fear of punishment or retribution. They don't feel respected. People need to feel respected for their contributions and valued, to be valued as employees, as individuals. And value, they need to feel that their work matters, that they're making a meaningful contribution to something larger than themselves. And when these needs aren't met, employees either leave, driving up your turnover costs, or they mentally check out, reducing productivity and innovation. Either way, it costs your organization thousands of dollars per person. I've seen this firsthand in my career. At one of my most successful companies, we built a culture where the people felt safe, respected, and valued. It was important to me. And as a result, they were engaged and we were very successful. Our employees started calling it Camelot. It was a special place where people loved coming to work. When we sold the company, the new owners brought in a leadership that completely changed the culture. A few months later, one of my senior marketing executives came into my office in tears. Camelot is gone, she said. Despite the financial success of the acquisition for everyone, she and many others felt that something precious had been lost. That moment has stayed with me. It reminded me of what matters most in organizations isn't just financial success, but creating environments where people can thrive. Because disengagement isn't just an HR issue. It's a broader cultural issue. As I mentioned, think about the unique opportunity that L&D has to shape these environments. But to do this effectively, you need to move beyond traditional approaches for all learning areas that involve a human component, like employee engagement, customer service, safety, management leadership, and yes, compliance. We talked a lot about behavioral science. Now let's see it in action. One of our customers, a major financial services company, was struggling with retention issues, despite having what they considered a strong culture. They had conducted engagement surveys that showed generally positive results, but they were still losing key talent at an alarming rate. When they implemented our behavioral science-based learning approach with detailed insights, they discovered something surprising. While their overall culture was indeed positive, there were significant pockets within the organization where employees didn't feel psychologically safe. These hotspots weren't visible in their aggregate survey data, but they became clear when they analyzed the behavioral and attitudinal data that we provided during their mandatory training. In one particular division's employees consistently indicated that they didn't feel comfortable speaking up when they saw problems. They feared retribution from their manager. This was happening despite the company's strong overall culture and explicit policies encouraging open communication. With this insight, the company was able to address the specific issue within that division rather than implementing a broad organization-wide initiative that wouldn't have solved the real problem anyways. And the result, retention improved by 23% in that division within 6 months. Another example comes from a healthcare organization that was having issues topically today on diversity initiatives. Despite substantial investment in diversity training, they didn't see the results they expected. Using our approach, they discovered that while most employees intellectually supported diversity, cognitive learning, many had unconscious biases that affected their behavior. And some were experiencing diversity fatigue from training that felt accusatory rather than constructive. By using this new training approach that addresses all three learning domains, cognitive, affective, and behavioral, they were able to create more inclusive behaviors and attitudes. The key was moving beyond telling people what to do to help them understand why it matters and how to do it in practical, everyday situations. And importantly, there's a strong moral imperative to this work, and I want to drive this. This is so important to me. We spend a significant portion of our lives at work. We know this. And when work environments are toxic, disrespectful, or unsafe, it affects not just our professional lives, but our personal well-being, our families, and our communities. I know I'm speaking to the choir here. You are here today because you care. You want to learn more. I need your help in getting to the people that aren't here so that we can help reinforce this moral imperative of what we do. By creating more respectful and engaging and inclusive workplaces, we're not just improving business results, we're improving lives. We're creating environments where people can thrive, grow, and contribute their best. I believe this is the true purpose of learning and development, not just to transfer knowledge, but to transform individuals and organizations for the better. The greatest reward in L&D isn't just that employees complete training, it's that they transform into people who embody the values and behaviors that will help make your organization successful. Let's talk about a great story. Hubert Jolie's work at Best Buy. And I encourage you to read his book. I know that several have recommended books, but his book, Heart of Business, really encapsulates a lot of what I believe. Best Buy, when Jolie took over as CEO in 2012, Best Buy, I'm sure some of you remember this, they were struggling, losing market share to Amazon, declining sales, a stock price in free fall. I would go shop some of my electronics there, and it was a horrible experience. But what Jolie understood, that so many others had missed, was that Best Buy's greatest asset wasn't its physical stores nor its inventory. It was its people. Instead of massive layoffs or store closures, Jolie invested in the company's employees. He recognized that the path to transformation ran through the hearts and minds of the people working on the front lines. He famously told his leadership team, no genuine human connection can exist without vulnerability, and there's no vulnerability without imperfections. He embraced those imperfections and created space for authentic connection. You too have the power to create that same kind of transformation within your own organization. You're not just training providers. You are not just order takers. You are catalysts for organizational transformation. You are the ones shaping the experiences, decisions, and growth of every employee who walks through your training sessions. whether they realize it in the moment or not. Every time an employee sits down to go through mandatory training, you have an opportunity. It might seem small, just a couple hours out here and a couple hours here, but those moments add up. Collectively, they represent thousands of hours of attention that you have. And within those hours lies potential. The potential to shift behaviors, to challenge biases, and to plant the seeds of stronger leadership. Those moments can be key insights to help your organization address issues before disengagement sets in, before people feel unheard and unseen. I'd like to close with a call to action. I hope you can see how passionate I am about what we are doing in learning and development, the opportunity that we have. L&D professionals like you are in a powerful position to drive organizational change. You have a captive audience, required training, and budgets already allocated. The question is, will you use those resources to merely check boxes, or will you use them to make a real difference? In aviation, there's a moment on every flight when a pilot must make a decision to continue with takeoff or abort. Once you reach a spot on the runway, you're committed to flying. You are past the point of no return. I believe that L&D is at its point of no return moment. We can either continue as we have been, checking boxes, delivering cognitive focused training, or we can commit to a new flight path that embraces behavioral science and drives true transformation. So here's my challenge to you. Take the controls. You know where your organization's training gaps are. You know the difference between checking a box and changing behavior. You have the tools to make an impact. It's time to commit to a new flight path. It's about transforming the way organizations learn before they need to. The opportunity is in front of you. The runway is clear. The momentum is yours to build. Thank you for your time, your attention, and passion to make a change. Hannah, what do we have for questions?
Yeah, everyone is saying thank you right now, and I think feeling very empowered. We did have one comment from John that says, as new leadership at a state university, I've been visiting different divisions and noticing pockets where employees really feel valued, but the culture varies widely. And he's saying, I'd love better visibility into what's working across the institution so we can learn from those successes and address what's not. So that was a good comment. And then we had some.
And again, that's the power of common compliance training that all places across the organization have to take. You know, accountants have to take specialized training, lawyers have to take specialized training, the warehouse people take specialized training. A common thread that L&D has is this mandatory compliance as well as company-wide training. And that's the opportunity you have to get that cross-breed pulse of how everybody's doing.
Great. And then lots of people saying it was inspiring, which is great. Wonderful session. Sarah did ask if you have any recommended books on this topic.
I do strongly recommend Herbert Jolie's. I am a CEO, so it's inspiring to me as a CEO to read a fellow CEO and how he changed the culture at Best Buy. I had a friend of mine that read it, and he goes, "Well, that's great, John, but how do I get my CEO to change? How do I get our C-suite to change?" And I said, well, the power that L&D has is you can roll out behavioral-based programs and be the eyes and ears. I promise you that as soon as you, and we have customers, many customers that we've helped do this, where the L&D starts percolating up findings of what they're identifying. And pretty soon, the respect that the C-suite starts having about these findings all of a sudden naturally elevates your importance of your role in the organization. You can make comments like, wow, look at this data that we're showing that there's some hot spots. Well, I promise you that the C-suite wants to see that. And of course, tying it directly to KPIs in your business, that's essential. Is tying those behaviors to KPIs. That linkage is vital. And that's, what we help our companies to do as well as others.
Great. And then we have a couple questions about how to become an expert in L&D, and if you have any advice on that.
So, since I am new, and many that I brought into Atana were new to the L&D space, we faced the same sort of issue. The interesting thing is, I don't believe that all of us need to be doctors of philosophy or doctors of psychology. You can understand some basic human dynamics. I mentioned I'm a flight instructor. Well, how do you teach flight instructors human psychology of learning? Like I mentioned, the learning is pretty intense. The stakes are high. So how do you help these younger flight instructors understand some basic human psychology? And there is training that we are provided as beginning instructors in basic human psychology. So some of it is available to you. You heard the session before about human psychology. But really, most of us have understanding of what works for us. And I believe that if you can get inspired, then you can help others get inspired. And that being that leader in your organization is what's key. I know some of you have mentioned that you're solo practitioners, right? You might be the sole person inside your organization. And how can you drive it? I look at that and I think of that as what a wonderful opportunity to really start driving it. You're already spending money. Every company's got to do this compliance training. And yes, sometimes we're driven to go get the cheapest stuff that we can find, but the payback on just 1 or 2 employees that you retain more than covers the difference in getting better and higher quality compliance or mandatory training or safety training. An interesting thing about safety, most safety training is cognitive, right? This is how you drive a forklift. This is how you should be stacking boxes. This is how you should be, it's safety. This is how you operate a nuclear power plant. But the issues that they've been finding have all been due to behavioral issues or attitude issues and all the common attitudes. But yet, safety, there isn't training to the individuals about their behaviors and attitudes. What a wonderful opportunity to using behavioral science to help eliminate a lot of the issues in an unsafe environment. We found it profoundly in sexual harassment prevention, profoundly in bias training, and really the soft skills, leadership training. It's huge. It's about human psychology.
And we had another good question come in that says, besides role playing and case studies, what are some other effective modalities to build the behavioral based skills instead of just cognitive?
So we obviously spend a lot of time discussing the different modalities of I would say, and I know I'll probably get criticized for this. Since I've been involved with Atana now 8 years, I've seen the waves come and go of whatever we're trying to do. And I remember the gamification phase. And gamification, to my dear friends at ELB, it has definite value, particularly with knowledge base. That's why they have the Jeopardy game, right? That's knowledge of facts and situations. I have not found that successful in behavioral changes. However, what has changed is very emotional storytelling vignettes, as well as situational scenarios, real life scenarios, which is essential. That is what's key, is that you have to you relate, the content has to relate. And real quick, part of the secret is why mandatory can work as far as changing human behaviors. You have to have great content to pull the learner into the story. Then you can ask them questions that they will be more forthright to answer. You've engaged them. So the key is content that's engaging. You pull the learner in, and you can say, hey, do you agree with this? What do you think about this? Do you feel your company is supported? You're creating an emotional connection with the learner. Therefore, your answers, the answers they provide, are much more accurate. That's the behavioral science. Liz, you're on. I know what that means.
It is, but this was beautiful. Your voice is so soothing.
Even with my cold, Liz, even with
Yes.
my cold.
Yes, everyone in the chat was just like, I feel so validated. I'm like, I am not even in that shoes and I feel validated. So this was amazing.
Well, I am passionate. You gave that. I mean, this is for all my friends. This is my swan song. I'm an old guy. This is it. And I didn't want to go back to technology, to hard tech. This is my swan song. And I believe we together can really change society for the better through work. I'm passionate about that.
And I love it. You're making me passionate about it, which is so cool. But before we say goodbye to everyone else, is there anything else you would like to leave with the audience today before we say our goodbyes?
Well, I do thank you for this opportunity. We are passionate about this. I got a group of people that are passionate about making these changes in behavioral science. It is possible for us through work to make our society a much better place. And that's what I'm excited about.
Such beautifully said. Thank you so much, John. We appreciate you so much. This was truly a wonderful session. For everyone else, though, who is still with us here today, I just want to say another thank you to all of our dynamic speakers and our amazing sponsors, Sweet Rush, Leadership Progress Cycle by Niche Academy, ELB Learning, HSI, Atana, and Open Sesame. So all of our sessions are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CPTM. Just send me an email or anybody on the TI team and we will send you those codes. Additionally, I would love to meet you all here in Raleigh, North Carolina for a 2025 Training Industry Conference and Expo. TICE is where learning leaders like you forge new professional connections, learn from each other, address your most pressing learning challenges. So early bird is open until the end of March, which is coming by quicker than we think. So check it out while the sale is still going on. And if you're looking to elevate your L&D career, our training, development, and delivery certification is rooted in industry-leading research and is designed to take your L&D career to the next level. You can learn more information at trainingindustry.com/courses. And one last reminder, that survey will pop open another tab in your browser. We would greatly appreciate your feedback. And thank you again for all joining us today. Until next time, I am Liz, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I see you soon. Bye, everybody.